Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman, and today I'm going to talk about a question I get asked all of the time. How do I stop fighting with my spouse about money? And secondly, how do I stay on a budget without having to build out a spreadsheet and check my bank statements every day? I'm going to show you what my husband and I did and what many of my clients have done as well that seems to have eliminated most of the fights about money and really helped us stay on a budget. So the first thing that you'll see here is a main checking account. This is the account that all of our funds go into every time we make a deposit. So every time we get paid, it goes into our main checking account. The only thing that comes out of the main checking account are mandatory bills and mandatory expenses. So some examples of that would be things like groceries, your mortgage, and maybe even medical expenses. Then there's an automatic push that happens. So from the main checking account, every month you should have an automatic push into a short-term savings account. Now, to be honest with you, this is a true savings account, and this is an emotional number in terms of what you should actually have in the account. This account is for emergencies. This account is for planned spending, like maybe a vacation where it's a big expense that happens once a year. And in addition to that, it can be for things like Christmas, where you know you're going to have a much different expenditure than you normally would on a different month. In addition to that, we also recommend that you create a long-term savings bucket where you automatically push that money in there. And I'll tell you why, because it has to do with the psychology of how you respond to saving. The money that gets pushed into the short-term savings account feels good because you see the account balance growing and you know that maybe it's for a vacation or for something fun. One of the things that we did initially when we built our financial plan is we had our investments and our insurance premiums draft from our main checking account, and all that did was create resentment towards that money because it felt like every other bill, except it was a very big bill. When we started pushing it into the long-term savings account, we stopped fighting about it, and instead we felt really good about the amount of money that was going in there, and then we just had it drafted from that account. So a very small change, all the money's going to the same place, but emotionally we had a completely different response to it. But here's the kicker. Do you ever feel guilty about spending money, or you buy something and then you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that because it didn't work in my budget? Here is a way to eliminate that. From the time most of us were very young, we got a weekly allowance. We're used to thinking about money on a weekly basis, not on a monthly basis. So when you look at this, what we do is we create an allowance account, and every Friday there's a transfer from the main checking account to the weekly allowance. My husband has one, I have one. They're two separate accounts. He can't see what I spend my money on. I can't see what he spends his money on. It's wonderful. If I come home with a new pair of shoes, he never says, how much did you spend on that? Because he knows it's coming out of the weekly allowance. The reason that this makes a lot of sense is that people have different spending habits. For my husband, he would spend no money, no money, no money, and then all of a sudden have an expenditure that was more than $1,000, and there was no way for me to budget for that. So we ended up fighting about it. My spending habits were very different. I would buy a series of smaller items. If we looked at who spent more money, it was probably me, but mine was much easier to budget for. With the allowance on Friday, there's a transfer, so you're flush for the weekend, and then if you don't spend the money, it just continues to sit in the account. So for my husband, he builds up a big balance, and then he'll go and buy something expensive. For me, let's be honest, I'm broke every Thursday because I know that money is going to show up right afterwards, right? And the reason is that's my spending money. I have a permission slip to spend that completely guilt-free. If you operate with a system like this, eventually it will be very easy to have everything go onto autopilot, and you won't need a spreadsheet anymore because you have all the right buckets for the dollars you're going to spend during the month. Good luck.